You know,
Are there other survivors?
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Atheist Impact. I'm your host, Xandar. I'm still trying to figure out some format for this, and one of the things that I came up with this time is to throw out a couple of public service announcements. And so the two things that I found that were coming up that aren't exactly right around the corner, but they are things that if you're thinking about it and you're an atheist and you want to get together with other skeptics and atheists in somewhere in the country, or somewhere close by, I just thought I would let everybody know that I just saw the video that the Thinking Atheist put up that was announcing the Imagine No Religion conference. So Imagine No Religion 3. It's going to be in Kamloops, British Columbia in Canada, and it's going to be May 17th through the 19th. So just a little bit over 4.5 months from now. And it's going to have all sorts of people that you'll recognize from the atheist community. It's going to have Aaron Ra from YouTube, Luis Antony, William B. Davis, Richard Carrier, Sean Faircloth, Christina Rad, that's Oh My God It's Chris if you're on YouTube at all. It's going to have AC Grayling, Victor Stenger. I know that I've seen him pop up a couple of times on the Atheist Experience, and he's written a couple of books. There's also going to be Brian Dalton, again for those YouTubers, that's Mr. Deity. And the keynote speaker is going to be Daniel Dennett. So he's one of the four horsemen, if you know of the four horsemen of the atheists, which is Harris, Dawkins, Dennett, and the late Christopher Hitchens. So anyway, I keep telling myself, last year I had the same conversation with myself. I found out about the Imagine No Religion conference and saw that it was going to be in Kamloops, which is really not all that far away from me. And the problem that I run into is that as it currently stands, I'm really the only person that I know of that in my circle, in my life, that even knows about the convention. And so going solo, it's kind of expensive. You got to factor in the gas and the hotel, the tickets for the conference, food. It's about 5 hours drive, and I would need to pick up a passport, which is kind of probably something I should get anyway. But still, it is an added cost to doing this. And it made me think when I was thinking about this earlier today, and it made me remember when I was driving cross country from Ohio back to Seattle in October of last year, which we're still in 2012, so October 2011, and I remember I stopped off at Mount Rushmore, and because, I mean, why wouldn't I want to stop at Mount Rushmore? I had never even been close to it that I had known of, and I figured, what the hell, let's do it. So I spent probably 2 hours at Mount Rushmore just kind of hanging out, and I remember recording a video that I ended up putting up on a different YouTube video. I won't even mention it so I don't confuse everybody. But I had another page, and so another account, another page, and basically I just kind of hung out there for a couple hours and then jumped in the car and headed west, kept going, and I remember seeing a sign for Devil's Tower, and I had no idea, because I hadn't even looked at the map, so I had no idea what else was on my path. Obviously, you see Mount Rushmore for hundreds of miles, the advertisements start popping up, because there's so much else around there that's trying to make some money off of you. So everybody's talking about, the Mount Rushmore Cafe and the Mount Rushmore motorcycle dealership and everything. So anyway, I stopped there and I had a really good time just hanging out there, but the amount of time I spent there caused it so that when I kept driving down the road and saw that Devil's Tower was just up the road, which again, I didn't even realize I was so close to it, I started, hauling ass trying to get to it, and it's way off of the highway, and I was driving my Dodge Caliber with a U-Haul trailer that had probably too much in it, and so it was really hard going uphill, and I was kind of heading up into the high country, so even though it looked like it was flat, I was actually going uphill, so pretty much even floored, I couldn't get my car above 55, 60 miles an hour. And so then the sun starts going down, and I get off of the highway at the Devil's Tower exit, and it's just this snaking, sidewinder road that's just horrible, absolutely horrible for what I'm trying to do and for my car. And it's taking me forever, and I make a couple of turns around the corners and there's deer in the road, which I wasn't really going fast enough to worry about it, but it obviously made me super cautious, which made me drive even slower. And so eventually I got within eyesight of it, and it was just too dark. And so I stopped and took a picture and said, well, I'll be back. And so I got thinking this past spring, I thought, hey, let's have an atheist get together, and what better place, what more tongue-in-cheek ironic place than Devil's Tower? Let's all meet up at Devil's Tower. So I started looking into it a little bit more, talked to a couple of people on YouTube and on Facebook, and the main comment was, there's nothing else there. And there really isn't. Devil's Tower, Wyoming is in the middle of nowhere, and everything in Wyoming is in the middle of nowhere. So you're in the middle of nowhere squared, no matter where you are in Wyoming. And so nothing is close, nothing makes sense to actually, there's not enough lodging in the area, probably camping, but, there are a lot of people that just don't like to camp, and a lot of people that would much prefer to stay in a hotel for a day or two. So I got thinking about it, and then I looked at the map and actually figured out, I thought it was only going to take me 10 hours or so, maybe like a weekend, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal, 10 hours for me to get there. Looked at the mileage and realized, no, what I thought was 10 hours is actually about 17, 18 hours of driving. And I realized, okay, bad idea, bad place. I'll just start looking around and seeing if there's something closer by. And at that point, it was too late for Imagine No Religion 2. It was a month away when I finally realized that was the next closest one, and at the time I really didn't have the money and didn't have the time that I could take off work to do it. And that's kind of where I am now. I have the money, I just don't really want to go. I want to actually try and plan it so that I can actually go and show up and be around other people and be comfortable. So anyway, also going on this year, coming up soon, actually sooner than the Imagine No Religion 3 convention, is the American Atheist 2013 National Convention. It's going to be in Austin, Texas from March 28th through the 31st. And I just looked it up, and it looks like the tickets are still available. And if you are an American Atheist member, then you get a discount on the tickets. It's not spectacular. I think it drops the ticket price from $250 to $200, but still, heck, that's not too bad, 1/5 off. So it also looks like it's going to be a lot. It looks like it's going to be a lot bigger than the Imagine No Religion 3 conference, but it also looks like it might be a lot more hectic. So it's got a lot of the same speakers, so a lot of the people that, if you can't make it to Austin, but you can make it to Kamloops or vice versa, and there are specific people that you want to see, check them both out and see if they're going to be at both to see which one actually fits your schedule a little bit better. Those of you outside of the United States, if you're in the States, or if you're planning a trip to the States anytime, or to Canada anytime in the near future, and you want to get together with some of the people that you've seen in the atheist community, I would highly recommend looking for either the Imagine No Religion or the American Atheist Convention to kind of try and plan your trip to the U.S. And maybe you can go there and meet up with some of the people that you've watched on YouTube, or maybe one day you'll actually see me at one of those, and we'll get to meet, which would be awesome. The American Atheist 2013 National Convention is also two of the speakers that apparently are not going to be in Kamloops that I saw that a lot of people would probably enjoy seeing is Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience, and also the Nonprofits podcast. He's going to be at the American Atheist Convention, as well as Seth Andrews. He is the Thinking Atheist. Now, since Seth Andrews, the Thinking Atheist channel was the one that put up the trailer for the Imagine No Religion, I'm imagining that Seth Andrews is probably going to be at the Kamloops Imagine No Religion 3 conference as well, but I couldn't find anything that said he was actually going to be there, so anyway. But I'm also, same deal, thought about going to this one, but when it popped up with the tickets, I had just moved into my apartment, and it was, I didn't have the money for it, and so it just kind of went to the back. So other than that, I punched atheist news into Google, and other than just the normal kerfuffle over atheist and secular Christmas and holiday displays, there really wasn't much going on in the United States. Not at least around the atheist-theist debate. There was a story, and apologize for not having this already read up on, but it didn't really strike me as a whole lot of anything. There was an American Atheist display billboard that was put up, and I remember there was some sort of politician that advocated for its destruction, and then someone went and did it, and there were no charges brought against that person for damaging it, and for vandalizing that. And I don't want to say that that's not a big deal. I mean, is it a big deal if somebody grabs a can of spray paint and goes and tags something or rips down or covers over a billboard or a sign or something? Sure, but I don't really think it's a big giant thing to jump up and down over. Obviously, the jump up and down part of it had to do with the fact that the politician advocated for its destruction. That's kind of a big deal. And I don't know. Personally, I don't care, but I understand the people that get upset over that one. And really that comes down to all of the displays. The Christmas displays and the holiday displays that then turn into, well, if you're going to have a Christmas display put up here by the Christians with a nativity scene and a Christmas tree and happy holidays and God bless us all and that kind of crap, then you need to allow a secular display of the exact, secular display that has equal visibility and equal size. I agree with that, and I have absolutely no problem with that. And I did read a couple of articles that were talking about some of the states or some of the local municipalities decided that instead of allowing the atheists and the seculars to put up their own display, they just took down all displays. That's not new news. That happens every single year. Every year, the atheists come together and they say, you know what? It's time for us to be given equal representation because you're not supposed to be giving favoritism to any religion, and therefore give us the ability to put up a display. And every year the politicians of some little town somewhere have to determine whether they're going to let it happen or whether they're just not going to have any Christmas display at all. Which, of course, then the crazy right-wingers, I say right-wingers, and I don't mean that just politically, I mean that religiously. The crazy fundamentalist right-wingers then get all up in arms and start screaming and yelling about how that's an infringement of their rights and that we're trying to kill Christmas and we're taking the Christ out of Christmas and how dare they, etc., etc. There's a nation founded on principles of God and 10 Commandments and sweet baby Jesus and all that shit. And they always make a mountain out of a molehill, and even when I was a Christian, when I was in high school and we talked about the whole prayer in schools, we talked about how if prayer was allowed back in the public schools, then obviously, coming from a Christian background, there was a lot of, all of the problems started when prayer came out of the schools, which anybody that actually looks and studies the demographics and looks and studies all the statistics on that knows that that's essentially bullshit. That it has nothing to do with that. I watched Freakonomics. I didn't read it, but I watched Freakonomics a couple of weeks ago, and the final section, or the final portion of that movie, which is actually 4 or 5 short films all put together, was talking about how when Roe v. Wade became legal, or when the Roe v. Wade decision came down making abortion legal, that people were suddenly given the choice to determine, or the choice to have a child or not have a child. And as gun violence as just violent crimes were growing through the 80s, growing and growing and growing to the point that we were coming into the 90s, and I might be wrong, but I want to say 90s. We're coming into the 90s going, oh shit, it's all happening, we're all screwed, this is going to be really, really bad. It might have been the 2000s, doesn't matter. Point is that then suddenly violent crime just started to drop off. And again, which I will bring this point up, and many people will bring this point up, correlation does not necessarily imply causation. And even the video portion of Freakonomics, the movie, actually says that. Says, this isn't 100%. We're not saying that this is what it is, but think about it. If you have a child that you have to carry to term because you can't get an abortion, be it because you live in an extremely conservative state that doesn't have abortion rights available to you, or they just make it so difficult that it is too much for you to have to go through in order to get an abortion, then you're going to end up having a child that if you wanted to get an abortion, you obviously don't want the child. Now, sure, you can give me a million stories of people that said that they wanted to have an abortion, decided not to have an abortion, and loved their kids 100% all the time, and they're so glad that they made the decision not to abort their child, and it was the best decision of their life, and they love their children, and everything is hunky-dory and happy. Fine, you can give me millions of stories like that, and looking at the statistics, there are also millions of stories of people who did not have abortion available to them and had a child that they did not want, that they did not care for, that they treated like shit, or got raised by the state, or got raised by a grandma or someone else or somebody else that didn't pay enough attention to them and didn't give them any of the nurturing that they needed to become fruitful citizens of our society. And those people are the ones that many times are in and out of jail, in and out of juvenile homes, and this and that and the other. They're the ones that can become the people that we look at and we go, well, of course they're going to commit crimes. Look at how they were raised, and look at the fact that they were never wanted from day one. And they know that. They know that they weren't wanted. And so, because of that, those people then turn to violent crimes. But anyway, backing way up, so we're going to go back further than Roe v. Wade. We're looking at prayer in schools. Prayer in schools. So talking about prayer in schools while I was in high school, in my private Christian high school, by the way, which most of you, well, podcasters don't know that. I went to a private Christian high school. I actually... in a nutshell, I am an Air Force brat, and so I spent a lot of time going in and out of military schools, not like military school, parents send you off to boarding school, but just military-run school. It's called DODS school. I can't remember. Department of Defense schools, something along those lines. Those are the schools that I went to for the most part. In 4th grade, I went to a private Christian grade school that my parents wanted us to go to. And then 5th grade was more private Christian school, then back to military school for part of 6th grade, at which point my parents pulled me out of the military school and started homeschooling me using a Christian curriculum. So from halfway through 6th grade all the way through graduation, I went to I was either homeschooled or went to a private Christian high school. So from 8th grade through graduation through grade 12, I went to a Christian high school. And so, of course, obviously, it was a Christian high school. We had prayer. We would start some classes with prayer. Sometimes we would just, we had a chapel day where all of our periods were shortened so that one of our periods could be used as chapel, and we would get together and we would, we'd be all dressed up and we would listen to someone talk to us about some random something. It was like another church service. And being a church-going family, we went to church on Sunday mornings and on Wednesday nights. So essentially, not counting Bible class and any other times that my school happened to just break down in prayer, I went to at least 3 different church services a week. So 2 at church and 1 at school. So, when the topic of prayer in schools came up, my objection, even then as a high schooler, was if you allow prayer back in schools, back in the public schools, and you say, you are now allowed to pray, or we are now going to have school-led prayer over the intercom system, or everyone standing outside around the flagpole, or whatever it may be. If it was school-led, which is what actually stopped when we quote took prayer out of schools back in the 60s, I believe, then what all we did was we said that the school can no longer be the ones to lead the prayer, that it can no longer be mandated. And it was just like so many other laws that the atheists and the secular groups are lobbying for now. It was because we didn't want to be a bunch of dicks to people that didn't believe the way that the prayer was going to go. I mean, just think about it. In my school, there were a lot of topics that we didn't actually talk about. We wouldn't talk about Catholicism. We talked about all kinds of Eastern religions and talked about how Buddhism believed in, it was all mischaracterized, although probably grade 12 Bible class, it was in my opinion, he was a very honest Bible teacher, and so we got a lot more truth out of him than we got out of any of our other Bible teachers. But, when we talked about Buddhism and Hinduism and Zen and I don't think we talked about Taoism, but when we talked about those, we didn't talk about them in a nice or a friendly light. It was, they're wrong and here's why. This is where the difference is between Christianity and Buddhism, and this is why Buddhism is wrong. And this is why Hinduism is wrong. I don't actually remember ever talking about Islam. My high school, for those of you that don't know, I'm turning 35 actually this week. So Wednesday I'll be 35. Yay. But this was the mid-90s, so early to mid-90s that we're talking about. So Islam wasn't front and center. I don't remember much of anything about Islam at all. I don't remember ever hearing anything about Islam until, to be perfectly honest, I want to say 9/11 was the first time I ever heard anything about Islam and actually had to go and look it up and figure out what the hell it was. Well, that's not true. I had heard a lot of stuff about the Palestinian versus Israeli stuff. My parents, we went to Israel in 1994 as a vacation, I guess you could call it. We were there for a week or two. We went to the Temple of the Rock. I don't think I went in, but we went and saw it, and it was cool, and I still didn't really understand anything. All I knew was that there were two groups of people that didn't like each other. I didn't realize that it was two completely and totally separate religions, even though you could say that they both worship the same God, that it's an Abrahamic religion and it's two different sects of it. But that was the thing, is at our school we didn't talk about Islam. But those different sects, S-E-C-T-S, those we did talk about. And yet we left a lot of them alone. We tried to the whole school tried not to piss off anybody because they never knew where the next donation was going to come from. So we had all kinds of strange rules that the school board and the teachers didn't necessarily agree with. But because we had to be careful not to piss off somebody, like I said, that may give money, we didn't have dances. So our homecoming and our prom, which we couldn't even call our prom. This one I never understood. They called the prom junior senior, and it was the junior senior banquet, and there was no dancing. And our homecoming, no dancing. And plus the prom, which I don't know because I didn't go to a different school. I thought that the prom was open to all high schoolers, whereas the junior senior banquet was open to only juniors and seniors. If they decided to invite an underclassman, then they could go, but otherwise it was just the juniors and seniors that were going to actually go to this banquet. And yes, they were as boring as you can imagine. I was part of one of them. I think it was my freshman year homecoming. I think I was part of the student council or senate or something like that, which led to me having to help plan the homecoming, and it was a horrible, horrible disaster. Because it was boring, and no one was paying attention, and no one cared, and yeah, it was just... Anyway. Point being, we didn't talk about a lot of different things because we didn't want to piss off anybody, and so the separations between Catholicism and Protestantism were never brought up because we had some Catholics that went to the school. The school itself was in an old Catholic old Catholic, not a nunnery, what's it called when it's nuns and not monks? Convent. It was an old convent. And anyway, so even then, we had all of these separations. We had different things that were taught. I remember writing an article for an advanced composition class that actually got published within the school. It wasn't like published, but we put it all together in a book and gave it all to all of the administrators. And it was all about God's will. those of you that haven't watched it, please take a moment, if you can, to go to my YouTube channel and look up my latest video other than this one, which is A Message from an Atheist. It did used to be called A Holiday Message from an Atheist, but I don't really talk about the holidays all that much, so I changed the title. But nonetheless, the point is that my school really and truly believed that everything that happened, what was taught in the school from the theology standpoint, was that everything that happens was according to God's will. And I'm not talking about God finding some sort of good out of the bad that occurs. More along the lines of God caused the bad to occur so that he could bring about this good thing that occurred. So the most recent video, the one that I just mentioned, other than this one again, addresses that and says, it talks a little bit about the Sandy Hook shooting, not a whole lot. It's more artistic and heartfelt as opposed to actually factual. But the thing that I never understood about that mindset, and the thing that never jived with me, and a lot of it was because it wasn't what I was taught in my theology from my church. So while I would get this theology crammed down my throat at school 5 days a week, at church, which I had been going to longer and had a stronger connection with these people and with this theology, was that God didn't, everything that happened wasn't God's will. Everything that happened was because we were fallen and we were sinful. So everything that happened was just a natural event that happens because we live in a fallen world. Whereas my school would look at it, and there was a kid in my junior year, he had all kinds of back problems, he had gone in for multiple surgeries, I think he had some heart issues too, but he had gone in for all these surgeries, and finally, one time he went in for a surgery, and he had an allergic reaction. If I remember right, he had an allergic reaction to the latex, and he died. And it was really shitty, because it was, 9 o'clock in the morning, school's about to start, some of my friends are already crying, I think at 8:15, whatever. Some of my friends are already crying because they've already heard the news through their parents or through other teachers or just talking. And, they get on the intercom and they say, hey everybody, we're having an emergency chapel service, everybody come on down when the bell goes. It gives us 5 minutes, the bell goes, we all come down. And they talk to us and they tell everybody in the school, hey, he died, here's the circumstances around it, and blah, blah, blah. And then immediately, as always, which a lot of people that come from theist backgrounds, or theism backgrounds know about this, is that immediately after they tell you about the horrible pain and grief that you're going through because of the loss, they tell you that, well, in this case, he was a really great piano player, and he was one of those, he was a class clown, and he wasn't the most well-liked class clown, he wasn't extremely popular, but nobody had a problem with him either. And so, of course, it was God took Josh so that he could play piano for God in God's throne room. And, I'm sitting there going, this is stupid. This just doesn't make any sense. It's like, and under the mentality of back then, which interestingly enough is pretty much my same mentality now. Even now as an atheist, I don't think of it as we live in a fallen world and everything that happens is because of sin. I think of it as we live in a natural world and everything that happens is a natural cause and event. To answer the inevitable question there, I am actually a compatibilist. I believe that we do have minimal free will within the causation that the universe has going on. So things are going to happen that are out of our control, and things are going to happen that we don't have a choice about, but we do have a little bit of wiggle room. And I haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking that one through, but that's kind of how I feel. And a lot of that's the reason I feel that way is because so far I have yet to study it fully, and so I don't know if I am able. I think the problem is that as it currently stands, I'm not able to let go of the fact that I have always been taught that I have free will. And so having that middle ground right now between having free will and not having free will, and saying I can have a little bit of free will in a little bit of wiggle room within the cause and effect nature of the universe, I think that's why I hold on to it. But anyway, they tell us that Josh died because God needs a new piano player, and then we're all just supposed to accept that, and we're all supposed to go about our day and go, well, it sucks that he's gone, but hey, God got his piano player, and maybe somebody, I went to the funeral, not the funeral, the memorial service for him, and they started doing the same thing. They started talking all about how God took him away from us because God needed him for a greater purpose, and that God was going to probably bring people to Jesus and therefore bringing them to God by taking taking one life in order to say one guaranteed soul up to heaven to maybe get 2 or 3 more through his, I don't know, through his story being that he was, I don't even know. I mean, it never made sense to me. And so I wrote the story, or after all of this happened, I wrote a critique, and I talked about Job, and I talked about how the problem with Job wasn't so much, and this is Job from the Bible, the problem with Job wasn't so much that that everything that happened was God's will, although if you go back, like looking at it now, obviously I'm slightly wrong. But let's ignore my view now, and at the time, my view was it wasn't that everything that happened to Job was God's will, it was the fact that in Job, and this was where the power of words and faith and belief actually really came into play in my version of theology that I had been taught and that I knew, and that was, at one point in Job says, "That which I have feared the most has come upon me." Now, that which I have feared the most has come upon me, to me, and to many other Christians, is the opening that allowed the devil to do what he did. It wasn't God, and this is apologetics, we'll say 201, because it's a little bit more than basic. But imagine that if faith and fear have actual power over what God can and can't do, then if I admit my fears, if I say that I am afraid of failure, what my theology, the theology that I was taught, what I believed was, if I admit that I am afraid of failure, that doesn't cause God to say, "Okay, Satan, go ahead and do whatever you want to." What it essentially does is it says that I'm not trusting in God to keep me safe, and I'm not trusting in God to make me successful, and therefore that opens the door to allow Satan to come into my life and to cause me to fail. So, yes, it's inaction on God's part, but again, the way that I was taught was that it's my fear that basically binds God. God won't force himself upon me, which actually sounds really bad just now, but God will not force his will upon me. And that was where I just had such a horrible conflict in high school, because I was under the impression that God would never force anything to happen. Everything that happened was either due to our own disbelief, our own doubts, our own beliefs, our own words. It was the power of words. It was the power of belief. And those were the things that were actually going to cause bad things to happen to us. Not Satan and God sitting around playing, Parcheesi, and then Satan going, "Hey, check out that Spencer guy down there. He's pretty good at following you, but I'll bet you if I took some stuff away, he wouldn't listen to you anymore." That wasn't the case. That's not what I believed. And even though that's exactly what the story of Job says, which is, Job was just chilling, doing his own thing, and God and the devil were having a conversation, and God was like, "Yeah, sure, do whatever, man." And Satan had at it. And so, again, apologetics-wise, I looked at it and I said, okay, here's the story as it's laid down, and that is that Satan was doing all of this and that God had nothing to do with it. But then I found that one verse, latched onto that one verse, and said, here, this is what allowed Satan to do all of this stuff, because this was his fear, this was the power of his words, and this was the power of his belief or his disbelief. And so I wrote an article about that in critiquing my school's dogma and my school's theology, because we had such a diverse theology. There was nothing other than you had to be a Christian of some sort in order to go there, and you had to sign a little sheet of paper saying that, I am a Christian and I believe that Jesus was the Son of God, and that he came down and he died on the cross and he was raised 3 days later, and that he lives inside my heart. And so that part was it. I mean, what is it, Romans 10, 8, and 9, whatever it is. If you believe in your mouth, confess in your heart the Lord Jesus, and believe that God raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. Totally butchered that, but I'm perfectly fine with that too. So anyway, that's all you had to say, and that's all you had to agree to in order to go to the school. And so it wasn't really all that big of a deal. But when I actually wrote that essay and I put it in the book and it went around, it actually caused a little bit of ripples through the school. A lot of teachers that I had liked before treated me a little bit differently, and there was one teacher that was one of my churchmates' homeroom teacher, and she brought up just this big giant long objection, gave him a sermon at homeroom one day all about it. He was a year above me, and I think I had her for my English that year, and he said, "Oh, you were the one that wrote that." He said, we had to listen to her rant and rave for half an hour all because of that article. So, I mean, anyway, the point is that even then, I knew that there was just something wrong with what I was being taught at the school. The version of Christianity that I was being taught in my school, the more I found out later, the more I realized that it's a more... I don't know how to explain it. It's a pussy version of Christianity. It's taking absolutely no responsibility whatsoever for any of your actions. Everything that happens is up to God. Everything that you do is up to God. Total predeterminism. I mean, nothing could be anything other than God's will, and therefore you have no free will because everything that happens is God's will. You have no reason to complain because everything that happens is according to God's will. There's absolutely no point in praying because everything that happens according to God's will, like whether you pray or whether you don't pray, and the outcome of said prayer. And the whole God works in mysterious ways was actually more my church than it was my school, because the school didn't say that the Lord works in mysterious ways. They said, we just don't question it because everything that happens is according to God's will. And it got really old. And so to bring this all back around, even then, with my objections to the way that the theology was being taught at my school and the way that the theology was being taught at my church and how they conflicted, I knew that when we took prayer out of schools, so that we would be fair and not actually set one group of people above another group of people, because that's what our Constitution says we cannot do. We cannot give preferential treatment to a subset of people and say, you are more important than these other people are over here, no matter what majority or minority those people may be. And so taking prayer out of schools means that now the Muslims and the Hindus and the Jews and the pagans and the Wiccans and the atheists and everybody can be treated exactly the same, which is no prayer. No prayer at all. And I had no problem with that even when I was in high school. And I mean, it drove me nuts that I had to go to a private Christian school. I didn't like it. I mean, I had enough God in my life with the church, with the 2 church services that I had to go to with my church and the constant bombardment from parents and everything else. So, I mean, it was just overload all the time. But even then, I knew that the reason that we don't do these things is because we don't want to set up a system where we have preferential treatment for other people. And even then, I knew that bringing prayer back into the schools, or putting God back into the schools, like God's being kept out because of the laws of man, which there are Bible verses that actually back that up, that say that whatever you let loose on the earth, I will also let loose in heaven. Whatever you bind on earth, I will also bind in heaven. So there is the theology that says that if we tell God he's not allowed in the schools by getting rid of mandated and obligatory, what's the word I'm looking for, participation in Christian prayer, then, well, I guess, according to their theology, when we ban that, then we've banned God, because we have bound God's power, and God is only as powerful as we let him be in our life. I mean, theology is so much more vast than just the simple, I believe in God, and I don't believe in God, and I believe God the clockmaker, etc., etc. I mean, one of the things that I've learned over the course of the past 2 years, actually, one of the many things that I've learned over the course of the past 2 years, and that is that nobody likes any of the labels that go on anything. I mean, if you talk to somebody and you say, what do you believe in? And they say, well, I believe that there was a God, but I believe that it, whatever it may have been, just kicked the universe into motion and has had nothing to do with it. Then you go, okay, well then you're a deist. And they're like, well, what does that mean? Oh, well, it means that you believe in an impersonal creator, the clockmaker God. And they go, well, no, that's not really it. And so you ask them to clarify. And they describe it exactly the same. And you say, right, that's deism. And they go, well, no, I'm not a deist. And so, I mean, man, YouTube is horrible in this way. And those of you that are on YouTube, and knowing that most of the channels that you found me through, I know that there have been so many arguments about this, and I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, words have definitions, and those definitions, and this is important enough that I wrote this down. Definitions are important because communication is the goal, and when we attempt to make a word mean something other than what it is, we lose the meaning or we risk alienating others because we are implying something other than what the world has meant to other than what the word was meant to communicate. If we just suddenly change it and we say, well, I'm an atheist, but I believe that the universe is God. Well, then you're not an atheist. Well, I'm not an atheist, I'm an agnostic. Well, now we're talking about two different things. Well, I'm agnostic then. Well, now you're just trying to be a hipster. I mean, sure, there are people that actually understand agnosticism. I understand agnosticism, but I don't claim to be an agnostic. I don't claim that agnosticism is a God stance either. But the whole atheism versus theism thing is, there are so many different subsets. I was talking to somebody on Reddit, and they said something about believing in a God, but they were an atheist, and then they started believing in a God based on the fallibility of man, and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it didn't actually make any sense. It didn't seem like the person was being very logical. And so, basically, they were trying to find a community for people that were ex-atheists. And I said, well, you know, if you believe that the universe was this, then it's pantheism. If not, then it's deism. If not, it's this. And then, you know, if it's chakras and crystals, then it's New Age. It's like, there are all these different things. It's like, but you're trying to describe what you believe using nebulous terms that don't actually mean anything. And it's like watching some of the Atheist Experience episodes. Sometimes it drives me a little batty, but I understand why they do it, especially Tracy Harris. I really like Tracy. I think she is extremely intelligent and her arguments are awesome. But sometimes she will pull the whole, what do you mean by spiritual? What do you mean by mystical? What do you mean by spirit? What do you mean by mystic? What do you mean by this? And I understand her point. I completely understand her point. The problem that I have with it is that it completely and totally derails the conversation. I mean, can I explain what spiritual means? Sure. But you're not going to accept the definition. Neither would I. Not now. I would say, okay, well, you're talking about something that isn't real and something that's outside of the dimensions as we know it, and therefore it can't be tested, and so what's the point and how do we know that it's actually there? Oh, well, it affects us. Well, then if it affects us, then it apparently has a natural it has some sort of effect on the natural, which is something that can be tested. Well, no, but it can't be tested because it doesn't leave any signs that it's there. And that's actually one of my favorite clips, which is that, well, I've seen it a couple of times on there, but that is a God that exists outside of space and time and affects us in a way that is indistinguishable from him not affecting us is either a useless God or completely and totally indistinguishable from a God that doesn't exist. And that's an excellent point, and always an awesome point. So, anyway, this whole portion was supposed to be kind of an atheist primer, or primer, however you want to say that word. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time. I mean, first of all, I don't have any live calls coming in, and that is something that I eventually will work into this. It will probably help when I'm not doing it on a Saturday night at 10 o'clock, and then posting it up on Sunday mornings. But I want people that run across this to, first of all, understand some of the words that I'm going to use and how I'm going to use them. And also, since there aren't a lot of atheist podcasts out there, and since I am hoping to be one of the latest and greatest on the block, then I kind of want people to feel like they can actually learn something and not just hear me ramble on about life experiences and just, randomness. So the thing that I wanted to bring up today, this is what I've been talking about with the whole atheism versus theism and agnosticism and all that kind of stuff, is that, and I'm going to go back to this one more time, is that definitions are important because we're attempting to communicate back and forth. So when you tell me that you are an agnostic, I don't want to say, wait a second, how can you be an agnostic when Gnosticism has to do with knowledge? And it's a perfect, if I could show you a picture, if this was a YouTube video only, I would totally show you the picture. And it is basically showing that there is Gnosticism and agnosticism, and then there's agnosticism. But agnosticism, for those of you that don't know, basically says that the question of God is useless. And so if an agnostic says, I don't know if there's a God, if a God exists, and a Gnostic says, I believe that a God exists, the agnostic says, what do you mean by God exists? The question is gibberish. The question is meaningless. You haven't defined anything, and therefore, using the term God, you have completely and totally lost me because I don't know what you're talking about. And it's not an ignorance standpoint. It's kind of like I said earlier, it's like Tracy Harris saying, what do you mean by spiritual? She would be a good example, to a degree, of what agnosticism is, which is, you're talking gibberish to me. What you are saying when you talk about supernatural, or mysticism, or spirits, or spiritual, you are talking a complete and total gibberish to me because I don't understand what those terms mean. And it's not that she doesn't understand what the terms mean. She understands what the terms mean in the common parlance of the word, but how are these people using it, and what do they actually mean to explain, or what are they trying to explain? So anyway, so ignoring agnosticism for just a second, then you have basically a graph that says atheism versus theism. And so atheism is, I do not believe that I'm sorry, I'm going to get this wrong. So atheism, this is why I should write things down more often. Atheism is, I do not believe a God exists. That's it. I don't believe. I do not believe a God exists. Not, I believe no gods exist. That would be anti-theism. And it's kind of like Matt Dillahunty has said, I don't like using all of these terms because it just clutters the entire conversation. The problem is that people identify themselves along these lines. And yes, as Sam Harris and many other people have said, if we didn't have people that still believed in God, we wouldn't, and I think Ricky Gervais actually had an article recently about this too, that was talking about if we didn't still have people that believed in imaginary friends, we wouldn't have to have these terms. We wouldn't have to say, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in the bullshit that you do believe in, being a theist. And so basically, if you aren't a theist, then you simply just are. You would have to say, oh, I follow Zeus, or I follow Yahweh, or I follow Allah. And everyone else, it would just be assumed, yeah, you guys don't believe in anything. So the term atheist is disliked by a lot of people, like Sam Harris, and Neil deGrasse Tyson is another one. He doesn't like the term. And that one, I don't know. But anyway, so the point is, atheism, I do not believe any gods exist. Theism, I believe a God exists. That's it. Belief. We're talking about belief. What do you believe? And belief is a brain state. You cannot... I don't understand this one completely, but I'm going to say it anyway. You cannot make yourself believe something. You either have the evidence available to believe. Now, you may be accepting bad evidence, but you either have the evidence available to you that causes you to have the brain state of belief, or you do not have the evidence, or you have evidence to the contrary, that creates the disbelief in your mind, or the non-belief in your mind. So, atheism, I do not believe any gods exist. Theism, I believe a God exists. Now, Gnosticism. Gnosticism has to do with knowledge, and in this case, we're talking about a Gnostic is a person that claims to know, which is knowledge, not belief. So, if you claim to know that there is no God, then you are a Gnostic atheist. If you claim to know that there is a God, you are a Gnostic theist. If you claim to not know that there are no gods, then you are an agnostic atheist. If you claim to not know that there are gods, but you believe that there are gods, that's it. I don't know, but I believe that there are gods, then you are an agnostic theist. I mean, it's really actually pretty simple, and it's talking about two separate things, but as word usage changes over time, a lot of people have accepted that there is an in-between. A lot of people have said, in between atheism and theism is agnosticism. Theism is the claim that I know, Gnosticism is the claim I don't know, and atheism is the claim I don't believe that any gods exist. So, again, like I said, and like Matt Dillahunty and all kinds of other people have said, it all just clutters the conversation and it makes it confusing. But I wanted to bring this all up because I don't want somebody 3 podcasts from now going, wait a second, you just said atheist and then you referred to it in a way that doesn't match. I will do my damnedest to make sure that I am constantly referring to the words in the way that I intend to use them and the way that I understand them. If for some strange reason my views change and I get a really, really good argument that explains to me why my views on Gnosticism and agnosticism, atheism and theism are incorrect, then I reserve the right to change my mind. But until then, and that's going to be one hell of an argument, and I watched all of the arguments on YouTube, and not one person made it extremely clear, or not one person that was in the opposite camp of the way that I already believed it to be, and the way that I stand by, that actually caused me to change my mind, or even think about it. But obviously, it's something that a lot of people bring up. So, if you want to call yourself an agnostic, fine, but I'm going to say, okay, so, what don't you believe? What don't you know? As opposed to what don't you believe? I'm not going to assume that you're one of those people that just sits in between atheism and theism. So anyway, we're coming up on 50-some minutes, and that's of recording, plus the intro, plus the outro. I don't really have a whole lot else going on, so even though I didn't quite hit an hour, I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for the night. And I would love to hear back from you all. Those of you that are on my YouTube video or YouTube channel, obviously you know how to get a hold of me. Those of you that are not, feel free to email me at xandarsmeteor@gmail.com. And remember that Xandar is Xandar. So that's XandarMeteor@gmail.com. No, actually, that's completely wrong. It's XandarsMeteor@gmail.com. So, yes, make sure it's Xandar's Meteor. And I am generally plugged in, I'll say 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's not because I only sleep 4 hours, it's because I toss and turn and I wake up and I go, oh, look, a new email. So, if you're trying to find me anywhere on the internet, just search for Xandar's Meteor. You'll probably find me. I'm on Reddit as Xandar's Meteor. I'm on Twitter as Xandar's Meteor. I'm on Facebook as Xandar's Meteor. And I'm on Google Plus as Xandar's Meteor, even though I don't check it. And I'm not really sure a whole lot of people that actually do. So, sorry, Google Plus. You just aren't all that great. And I don't like Facebook either. But Facebook's where everybody is, so I sometimes have to go there. If you are trying to find my podcast website, it is atheistimpact.podbean.com. And Podbean is PODBEAN.com. I did actually just sign a deal, not sign a deal, but I signed up for an upgraded package with Podbean. So as far as I know and as far as I'm concerned, over the course of the next year, this is where my podcast will reside. So you should be able to get in. If you guys give me any feedback as to the service that's provided to you by Podbean, that would be great. I've also noticed that a lot of people have found me through iTunes, and also some people directly through just adding me to one of their podcatching softwares. And yes, that was horrible. Podcatching softwares. Nonetheless, there it was. And I've also seen a couple of people pop up in Zune. Go Zune. I am a Zune Xbox music fan. I've never been a fan of iTunes, and I don't own any Mac products, but that's not a conversation for here or there. So, I hope everyone is having a wonderful holiday season, and as this is going up on the day before New Year's Eve, Happy New Year to everyone, and I hope that this next year brings us all a lot of happiness and a lot of changes for the positive. So thanks again, everybody, for listening to episode 2 here at Atheist Impact. I'm your host, Xander. Have a happy new year, take care, and I will talk to you guys in a couple of weeks.